Hey everybody, how's everyone doing today? Awesome. Yeah, we've got a full house, it looks like, although I can't really see anything. Yesterday we were told there's like 75 people in the morning, and then by the afternoon it turned into like 200. So it looks like we've got a full house here. So thanks everyone for coming out. Before we get started, I just want to thank the conference organizers to helping make this happen and giving us the opportunity to come out here and present. And of course, thank all of you. It wouldn't happen if we didn't have such great demand for all these services and a lot of interest in repairing equipment. So yeah, this is really awesome to see all of you guys come out here, and just kind of cool to get that group going from like 75 people to 200 plus. So again, thanks everyone for coming out. We'll get this started. I'll kind of introduce who we are, what we do. We've got a whole day planned of activities. So we'll get it started. I think everyone's here. Just we wanted to kind of give it a few more minutes. I saw there were a lot of people kind of still registering up front. So yeah, we're ASIC Master. We're out in Chicago. Our purpose really is helping people get onboarded onto the blockchain and just making sure that everybody's got equal and fair access to the blockchain, and just helping them repair their equipment and extending the lifetime of the equipment. A few years back, I mean, I've been mining for a while. A lot of people just kind of bought the equipment, didn't really think about what would happen if it would to go bad or break. With the rise in prices and the supply chain issues we've had a huge increase in equipment costs. So there's been a huge increase in demand for repairing equipment. We went from just kind of trashing the equipment if it went bad to, well, I don't want to spend $10,000 on a new miner. Let's see if I could just replace it or repair it. So that's where we are. So what we do, we repair ASICs. We got Bitmain certifications. We've got micro BT certifications. We've got like tons of certifications. We've got pretty good staff. We offer some advisory services. We do training. We do like one-on-one training. We could do it virtually. We could do it at our facility in Chicago, or we can come out to your facility if you have one. If you have staff on site at your facility, we can come out there and we can train your staff and advise on how that works. We've got some warranty repairs that we do as well. I mentioned some partnerships. We've got some ongoing partnerships that we're in discussions with other manufacturers as well, so that if you don't want to send your equipment to China and wait for 4 weeks for it to get there, and then however long it takes to get it repaired and then bring it back, and there's a lot of regulatory issues as well. So a lot of customers, they just say, we don't want to send it overseas, can you guys repair it? So we're working with manufacturers to do in-warranty repairs in USA as well. And then I want to cover just a few last-minute things that we added, so no one here is probably aware of that, but given the amount of demand we've had for this event here, so we decided to actually extend it to 2 days, so everybody here will have access to day 2. We'll be on the other side of the exhibition hall. I don't know what room it is, but I was told like Paul Oakenfold will be in the room with us as well, so maybe when we're doing one-on-one sessions, we'll have some live music going as well. So that would be pretty cool. We'll have a sign-up sheet going somewhere so you guys can sign up. It's basically going to be like one-on-one, 30-minute, 1-hour sessions. If you have like more in-depth questions, we have a couple of these workstations out here. I think we're going to have 4 or 5 of them there. They're going to be hooked up and running. You'll be able to like sit down and see the equipment like right up front. You'll be able to touch stuff, so that's going to be pretty cool. So we'll have that sheet probably at the end of the session today. You'll be able to sign up and do that. And then for everybody that's here, that signed up, that showed up, we're actually going to give you guys some free sessions. So I think we're going to be doing like 3 virtual sessions. You'll get an invite. I don't know what the schedule will look like, but you'll be able to kind of join and ask any questions you want. It'll just be online. You'll get an invite, so it will be like a webinar style. So those will be included for you guys for free, no charge. And then just before we get started, just to kind of a few safety things just to be aware of. There's 2 exits, one in the back on each side, just something to be aware of. We don't have a first aid kit, but there are defibs outside in the hallways as well, just something to be aware of. We've got a lot of people here. Everybody's got different medical conditions and things like that, just to be cognizant of that. When you are near the workstations, I think we're going to open these up for you guys to walk up and just kind of take a look at what we have here. We'll probably give you some safety glasses if you really want to kind of come close and touch anything. But in the session we'll have tomorrow, where we'll be like one-on-one, you'll definitely have a pair of safety glasses to wear. So just something to just kind of mention. Fire extinguishers. God forbid we need those, but we've got plenty of them. We brought them. We've got one at every station, so it's kind of part of our safety protocol. Even at our shop, we've got like 2 fire extinguishers at every station. You're working with small electronics. We haven't had a fire, but things kind of pop, and you're working with hot equipment, so you just got to make sure you're safe. The agenda, I'll go over that really quickly. We've got 4 parts. So we've got a morning session, afternoon session. In the morning, we're going to go over basics. We're going to go over intermediate stuff. In the morning, right now, we'll go over. I just went over some of the safety stuff. We'll go over more warranty stuff. We'll go over some firmware stuff. We'll talk about the software that's used. We'll talk about maintenance of the equipment. We'll do a little hands-on thing for you guys. After that, we'll talk about actual physical hardware. We'll talk about how the software works. We'll do a little Q&A. We'll do a little break, let you guys stretch a little bit. This is a pretty long session. We're here till like 4 p.m. So I don't want to be up here talking for 6 hours, and I don't want you guys to be sitting here for 6 hours either. We'll do a intermediate session. We'll talk about some common issues in troubleshooting. We'll talk about monitoring your equipment. You can monitor it locally. You can monitor it off-site. You could do it. There's different ways. We'll talk about that. As we go through these presentations and these sessions, like I think the common theme here is like you really got to maintain your software and your hardware, and that's really the best way to prevent having to repair it. So doing that will definitely extend the life of your hardware. I mean, we're talking like from 1 year to 4 or 5 years. So we want to make sure you guys are up and running and don't have any interruptions. So the big theme is going to be like preventative maintenance and just monitoring and keeping an eye on what's going on so that you can prevent all the more expensive issues coming up. Then we'll do a Q&A, and then we'll do a lunch break. We'll break for about 2 hours. After that, we'll resume at 1 p.m. We'll do intermediate stuff, and then we'll go into more of the advanced things that go on. In the intermediate session, we'll talk about the PCB components, the symbols. We'll talk about all the different circuits on a hash board. We'll talk about signal flow. We'll talk about the whole anatomy of a hash board. It's not just ASICs and heat sinks. There's a ton more going on there. We'll talk about common faults. We'll talk about the full toolkit. So what you see here on stage behind me, what you see on the sides, it's kind of like we'll go over all the different equipment. Like what do you need if you want to repair it at home, if you want to repair it at your shop, if you want to just buy the equipment, you're not sure what you want to get. This is all you need. We got everything here, so you can take a look at that and see that. In the advanced section, we'll go over testing, diagnostics, and rework. So we'll talk about like how to use all the tools, what are the software, what are the test kits. We'll talk about the test fixtures. We'll talk about the pick kits. We'll talk about the multimeters. And then the hands-on session, it's just like putting it all together. You've got a miner, like what do you actually do? Like we talked on here for hours and like, all right, but let's like take a miner and actually hook it up and see how it runs. So we're gonna try to do that for you guys. We've got Ethernet here, we've got power here. Unfortunately, we don't have 220 volts, so we brought one of the older gen models. So it works pretty much the same way. This is just kind of a schedule just to show you guys how it all looks. We broke it down into like 30-minute sessions. We've got some presentations. We'll do some hands-on and some Q&A, and then we'll do a little break. So altogether, I think there's 4 breaks just to let you guys ask questions and just stretch your legs a little bit. I'll leave that up for just a moment. There's going to be a lot of acronyms. I'm not going to explain them. Just take a look at them. We'll talk about them. It'll all kind of make sense. PICs, PSUs, ASICs, LDOs, EPROMs, IO, CB, HB, X's and O's. Doesn't mean hugs and kisses. It's good and bad ASICs. So we'll talk about all that. It'll make more sense later. And I do notice some of you guys are taking photos. We will make this PowerPoint presentation available to everyone. So do not feel like you have to write stuff down or take photos. We'll definitely share this with you guys. This is not intended to be secret information. We're here to share with you guys and teach you, and we're here to learn from you as well. So we're going to send this out to everybody. You'll have an opportunity to get a look at this at your own pace as well. Some things about warranties. So we're talking about minor repair here. So just something to think about. You buy the hardware. If you buy it new, it's obviously under warranty. If it's old, it's probably out of warranty. Just be careful. We don't condone you repair the equipment if it's under warranty. If it's under warranty, contact your manufacturer, see what they say. The customer service just keeps getting better and better over time. So just something to keep in mind, power surges, burned boards, disconnection of chip pins, and physical damage, corrosion, using third-party firmware. User modifying it. There's just so many things that there's warranty stickers on there. If you accidentally unscrew screw, you may damage that sticker. So just keep in mind, we don't want you guys modifying that equipment if it's under warranty. If you're not sure how to do it, we're here. You can always ask us. There's a lot of stuff online you can look up. It's just something to be aware of as you use your equipment. Then there's just some safety when you're repairing it. Some of this stuff can seem a little obvious, but you are working with very sharp tools. Actually, the hash boards themselves have really sharp components. Those micro components can really cut you. If you're just touching it once, you probably won't experience that. But if you're working at a repair shop like I do, you come out at the end of the day with just tons of cuts on your hand. So safety is really important. Gloves, glasses. I mentioned the fire extinguisher, having anti-static equipment. Not having anti-static equipment can definitely put your equipment out of warranty. Having a sectioned off area, something that we didn't even think about. We ended up taping off our equipment because things just kind of, they go flying. You never know. So just make sure your environment is safe for you, and if you have people around you, just some things to keep in mind there for that. So we'll talk about the components of a miner. There's really 6 main components. It's pretty common for all miners. You've got your control board. It tells it's like the brain. It tells the miner what to do, what pool to connect to, sends the signals back, and all the stuff gets consolidated there. You've got your I/O cable. It transfers the data from the control board to the hash board. The hash board is really where all the work gets done. It sends all that information over to the control board. There's an algorithm on the hash board. It runs the algorithm, it mines the coins, and then it reports back to the control board. You've got your power supply, depending on what model you have. Power supply is either embedded within the case or it's completely separate. It provides power to the miner. You've got your case. Case is pretty straightforward. It's just actually I don't think we have one right here, but we'll definitely get some out here. It's usually just an aluminum enclosure, and then you've got your fans on the outsides that run the air through it. So these are basically those components I just spoke about. That's what they look like. So you've got fans, you've got your control board. This is usually like a little case where the control board sits in. Sometimes the control board and the power supply, depending on what miner you have. If you've got a micro BT, they're probably both on top of the miner, and they're right there together. In the middle there, you've got that doesn't work on this side. You've got your hash boards. Most of the newer Bitmain models, micro BT models, the 3 hash boards now is kind of the common, and you've got your cables there, your power rails, your screws. So this is just you take a miner apart. This is, what do you expect there to be in there? That's what you get. That's what's inside of it. That's what makes it all come together. There's just a few things about the heat sinks. The designs of the miners have changed a little bit. So at the very top, we've got the older models. We've got L3s and S9s. The reason why we talk about L3s and S9s is because we have 110 power here. Those are the units that we were able to bring to show you guys. They are old models, although they are still profitable to mine on, so they are relevant for this exercise. So S17s, 19s, M20, 38, those are micro BT models. Those are pretty much your most common miners, most reliable miners. Best experience I've had is with the miners we have listed here. So we just wanted to show you guys that there are a few differences depending on what equipment you're interested in or what equipment you have or what experience you have. The L3s, they only have a heatsink on one side, so we'll definitely show you guys that later. I think we actually have some samples that we may at some point pass around, so you guys may get treated with that. The S9's got heat sinks on both sides. The 17, the 19, the Micro BTs, they have heat sinks on both sides. It's typically you have heat sinks on one side because the ASICs are there. The other side is like a heat plate to cool that equipment down. We just kind of put a table up there for you just to kind of see what the differences are. The older models, they use low temp solder. And of course they use glue. The newer models, they got a little bit better with the design. The equipment is always getting bigger. It's running at higher temperature, so they needed to use high temp solder. They started using heat plates. It's quite a lot of work to remove all those heat sinks one by one. So now they're using heat plates, and so they're continually improving and iterating on the design of these hash boards. We'll talk a little bit about firmware, and again, like in the afternoon, we're going to get into a lot, like modifying it, even like modifying individual ASICs on those on your hash boards. But for those of you that are not aware, your firmware, it's basically the software that runs all the equipment. There's a web interface. Typically, it's like your operating system for the miner. You can change all your settings. That's where you set your pool. It's a web interface. It's got everything there. You can set the password for it. You can look at the logs. You can see what's going on with the miner. You can modify it. It usually runs on some version of Linux. There's third-party firmware out there. It lets you fix like minor issues, and actually a lot of times that's all you need. We get a lot of customers that send us a miner, and we're like, based on what you're telling us, it's like a $500 repair. It gets here, and we fix it in 20 minutes, and we're just like, just pay us for shipping. We won't even charge you for it. So, and it would have saved so much time, right? Because then you got to ship it, and like you just want that thing. If you could fix it yourself, great. Like that's what we want. Especially right now when the equipment is so profitable, we don't want you to have it offline. So there are third-party firmwares out there. Just be careful. If you do it wrong, you could damage the equipment. But the equipment can run on third-party firmware. There's just so much customizations out there. Typically, there's some fees involved if you run third-party firmware. You can modify the equipment further. You can modify individual chips. It helps you like overclock the equipment. There's just a lot that goes on there, and we'll show you guys what that looks like, and we'll show you how to work with that and how to fix errors and things that's coming up in the day. So one more thing, depending on like what miner you have and what version you have, you can usually reload the firmware either through the web interface, or you have to actually take the miner physically and load the firmware onto an SD card and load it onto the hardware, and we'll talk about that as well. I mentioned that the theme of today is just like maintaining your equipment, having an eye on it, making sure everything looks good. Maintaining it is really important. I mean, it'll save you time, it'll save you headaches, it'll save you money. There's a few ways to clean it. We've got it up there. There's dust bunnies build up all the time. Replace the fans. If you're monitoring it, you see that the fans are going slow, they're going in and out. Replace them. You don't want your equipment overheating. Now there's a setting. I mean, most miners will have a fault switch. They'll shut off after like 80 degrees Celsius. I mean, even that is really hot. But they will shut off, and I mean, if you're not aware of that, you're going to be like, why is my equipment going offline? So monitoring it is really important. Replacing the fans, even the fans, I mean, that could be a headache, and it's a really easy fix, and the fans are really inexpensive. When you're handling the equipment, I mean, if you had experience taking apart computers, just be careful of anti-static stuff. It can happen. You can definitely shock it, and it'll definitely go off. So when you're unplugging equipment, it's good to power off the breaker as well if you're running it, depending on how you're running it. Instead of just unplugging it and taking it apart, just make sure the breaker's offline. You definitely don't want to trip anything. There's a lot of environmental needs as well when it comes to handling the equipment. So, if you're running equipment at home, it gets loud. So just kind of things to know about the temperature. You have to make sure. So this is a workshop about repairing equipment. We're not going to talk about building a farm and maintaining it and scaling. We have some experience in that as well, and we can have separate discussions about that, but we're going to keep this on topic. And so just to keep in mind, you don't want to keep the equipment outside when it's hot and it doesn't have access to air. You've got to have airflow. You've got to have good air quality, good moisture, good humidity. So that's going to help extend the life of the warranty. You don't want the environment to be too dry. That's going to cause static. You don't want it to be too wet. All the humidity is going to go on there as well. So getting it in the right environment is definitely really important. So we'll start with the hands-on session. I'll invite my colleague Austin on stage. I think he should be here somewhere. And he's going to talk about firmware. So he'll talk about stock firmware. He'll talk about the configurations. We've got actual miners here. We've got some hardware as well. We've got some hash boards. I see some on the table over there. He'll talk about that as well. He'll go over how to take it apart and clean it. Austin, you want to come on up? Thanks, everyone. Oh, wait, you've got your...
I need the clicker.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, this is a laser pointer. They just gave me this. So if you see there's a laser pointer, so if you want to point to stuff, this is forward and backward. So just
forward
and backward.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so you might click the pointer by accident, but you'll figure it out.
All right.
So just so you know, you've got about 20 minutes. So when that timer goes down to about 110, that's when we want to do the Q&A. Because we set aside about an hour for this session. So you want to do about, you've got about 20 minutes to talk about firmware.
Oh boy. All right.
I think that should be good, right?
Yeah. All right, welcome everybody. Right now we're going to go ahead and go over the firmware settings. So right here you have Bitmain's firmware. This is the basic overview. So you can see what the model type is. As you can see, it runs on Linux. Then we're going to go ahead and go to the next slide here. Now we have your monitoring, and then this is your kernel log. Now in your kernel log, you're going to see a lot of your problems, a lot of the errors that are in there. If you have a fan that goes out or a hash board that goes out, you can actually go into your kernel log and read the actual log and see what's going on with the actual miner. Now this is just the upgrade screen. Stock firmware, especially the newer models, pretty much only allow you to upgrade. Especially the S19s, you can't even flash it with an SD card anymore. So it just depends on the actual date of your firmware. I think it's on the other screen. So yeah, right. Oh. So you got your version right here. And this is your general configuration for your miner. This is where you're going to put in your pool. So that's the URL at the top. If you're switching from Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash or different pools, you change that URL there. Then you also have your worker name. So it's kind of important, especially if you're starting to build a bigger farm. you can actually number and name your worker based on its location. So it's like on this shelf, on this step, that kind of thing. Same thing with setting up like a static IP address. So that way you can actually use the IP address to locate the miner, as well as using the worker name. Passwords usually defaulted to 123, but you can change that. So that way people can't get into your miner without knowing the password. It also has 3 different pools, so that way, like if the first pool goes out, it'll default to your second pool, and therefore also your third pool. So you can use the same pool, or you can actually recommend it to use different pools. So that way, if like one pool shuts down, you can switch over to a different pool. This is also where you want to check to make sure that your settings are correct. So like if your miner isn't actually on the pool and it's not showing that it's hashing, you can come here, make sure that your settings are correct. Down here we have an advanced setting, so you can actually set your frequency of the board. So that's kind of like overclocking or underclocking your board based upon the frequency. Now here's a very important screen. This is your miner status. So as you see right here, this is the elapsed time that the miner has been hashing. So you go ahead and sometimes the miner will actually restart. So you'll see it say like a minute instead of like, it's been running for 21 days. That's because the miner actually restarted. Next we have here is like your real-time hash rate. So you can actually see what your unit's producing there. And then you also have your average. So your real time is what's happening right now. Your average is kind of obviously you're averaged out. Right here we have what's called the found block. So if your miner actually solved the blockchain system, it goes ahead and shows you right here. Then right here you have your pool settings. So it'll actually show you, the URL that you picked, your username, and the status on each of those pools. As you can see here, it says what the priority is. With a lot of these computers, they actually use 0 in the place of 1, so it kind of gets confusing. You think, you're working on chip 1, it's actually chip 0, for example. You also have like your nonce right here that gets more important later when we go over the test fixture and actually tell them what the nonce of all the chips are, but we'll go over that. Also what's accepted versus rejected. So that'll be like your acceptance rate that you see on your pool. You can cross-reference that with your miner status, like the hash rate and everything, with your pool. See, most of the time you actually lose a little bit of your hash rate. A lot of firmwares, even stock, will kind of have like dev fees. So you just got to do your research. And right here we have the different chain numbers depending upon what model you're working on, manufacturer. We'll actually show the different manufacturer screens here in a second. But right here we have the chain numbers. It can either start at 0 or 1 here. And that's your hash boards. So you have, your first hash board, second hash board, third, fourth. Right here you have your ASIC numbers. So if you have a hash board that actually has some ASIC chips that drop out, you can look here and actually see. And usually that'll also be transferred over to the actual real-time hash rate. So the hash rate will actually be lower. It's still mining, still hashing away, but it's just missing some ASIC chips. Also depends on the model. Because some models, they can run on several chips missing. Other models, one chip goes out, the whole board goes out. Can also take out the whole unit as well. So one board can spoil the whole batch. Right here we have your temperatures. So you have the temperature of the actual board, your PCB, and then you have the temperature of your chips. And so you want to make sure that this temperature doesn't get too high. And right here is what's called your hardware errors, so the HW. So as you can see here, 1 is at 0. That's probably your best hash board out of the bunch. But you look at this top one here, you notice how many hardware errors there are. So realistically, you probably want to downclock this system to prevent those hardware errors. Now we can go ahead and talk about these X's and O's here. So as you can see, the X's pretty much mean that the chip is not registering on the control board. And if you actually count the chips, it'll actually be the number of chips that there are. So this first one is your first chip, and this one's your last chip at the end there. So you can actually count those X's and O's and see exactly what place that chip is that's causing some issues. You also got your fan speed right here. You want to make sure that your fans are working good. Maybe even upgrade your fans depending upon your situation. If this goes down to 0, it'll shut off the miner most of the time. Sometimes it won't, and then it'll cause more damage to your machine. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining your miner, and you come to this screen quite often, daily if not weekly, to make sure that everything's running properly. Along with this and the kernel log that we discussed. So here's some other firmwares. This one's MicroBT. Again, it's a little bit different, but it essentially shows the same. Every single firmware shows different data. So if you're lucky, it'll actually show you what chips are showing right here. It says 111. So these hash boards are all working. Also here you have the fan speeds, lapse time. So just set up a little bit differently. Here's your same kind of screen we saw with Bitmain. Here's some Canon firmware. This one's for an Avalon miner. So again, you have your average hash rate, real-time hash rate, your miner temperature, fans, your elapsed time. And there's lots of other manufacturers out there. We're just showing you some of the main ones that are out there. And this is Gold Shell as well. As you can see, it doesn't show as much as the other ones that we just showed. Yeah, it looks like we're going to be moving on to a Q&A and do a small break.
Okay. Oh, there we go. So we've got two. Thanks so much, Austin. Hope you guys found this very helpful. It saves a lot of time watching YouTube videos. At least it did for me. We'll do a Q&A. We've got a mic here. We've got a mic here. If anyone's got questions, I mean, it's a small room. If it's a really quick question, I mean, you can raise your hand and call it out. I could repeat it. But if you've got something longer, you want to come up, yeah, come on up.
I just had a quick question on the firmware. So you saw that some firmwares void the warranty, and then even on like the newer models, you can't even flash the firmware on. So if you put, the firmwares now, you keep on an SD card on the control board. Does it show on the would that void the warranty since you're actually not flashing the actual control board? It's just on the SD card that you're that's on the control board essentially. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, so like one thing to keep in mind is sometimes they will put a security sticker where you have to insert that SD card. They will know you open that up. So whether you even loaded a firmware on there or not, it just, and what they do is they serialize all the equipment. So you can't just grab another, like if you really want to do another firmware and keep it under warranty, like you would really just need to swap out the control board. And sometimes they'll even have a security sticker on the screw that keeps the control board in there. So in the past, you could just swap out the whole control board. Then you could, and then they got smarter, so they put stickers on, they put stickers on all the screws and stuff. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think it sounds like you were looking for a way to modify the firmware without modifying, getting rid of the warranty. It gets more difficult. With the older models, it was possible, but of course they're out of warranty now. Any other questions?
Sorry, quick question. So say you've got it older, you're out of warranty, you already know that, not a big deal. What would you classify out of all the examples that you guys gave about the third-party firmwares? What would you say would be like the best open source option, like where you can both download it but also see what they're doing, code-wise and all this other stuff? What would you classify as probably the best open source option for third-party firmware in this space?
Okay, I'll let Austin take that. There's a few firmwares. There really is no one better versus the other. For me, it's really a personal preference of, your like your UI. You like it. It looks better. You're used to it. That's my take. I'll hand it over to Austin. He can talk more about the individual firmwares.
Yeah, so we usually don't like to recommend one firmware or one pool. We like to stabilize the blockchain that way. But with that being said, there's a lot of third-party firmwares out there. There's a lot of different pools out there. So, you got, there's Brains, Varnish, Hivon, Bliss, DJ. You can keep going and going and going. I guess the real thing that you want to be looking for in a firmware is being able to diagnose it a lot easier, go in and see actually all the chips that are on there, kind of auto-tune as well as manual tune all the chips. So you just want to do your research on the different firmware, maybe test out different firmware. Sometimes units like this firmware, and even though it's the same model, same everything, it actually likes this other firmware. So it just depends on the unit. You also, can test it out, help stabilize the blockchain by, doing different pools, doing different firmware in your actual facilities. That way, if there's hackers that try to get into one pool or one firmware, it doesn't destabilize the blockchain and cause like a 51% attack. That's, yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, destabilizing the ecosystem, very important. So we actually also run multiple firmwares. Thanks for mentioning that. Viruses do exist on these control boards, so you don't want your entire facility going offline. So if you use a few different firmwares, you eliminate that. So as you build out a facility, you do want to eliminate fault points, and they exist everywhere from where the power comes in to where the coins come into your wallet. So we had a hand up somewhere back there a while ago, so we'll go over to you.
Under the minor status,
Can you speak in the mic?
Do you mind standing up so we could just hear you a little better?
what is the optimum temperature for the chips?
Oh, good question. Well, they shut off at like 80 degrees Celsius, so keeping it under there is really good. I think like 60 probably is what I've had really good experience with. Keeping it, I think it's the really important thing is like, depending on where you're mining. I'm in Chicago, so we got really hot summers and we get really cold winters. Winters are great, summers are not. You want to build a system where the temperature is steady throughout, right? Like it's not going up and down all day.
And if I had to ask, what about humidity?
Yeah, humidity, 50, 60%. You want to keep it right in the middle.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking the question. Can't remember who. Let's go. You were next. Let's go with you.
Just a quick question. When you were talking about with the SD cards, how they might have the sticker on there. So I have some S19s that came with the test that's kind of stuck on there. I've learned, I guess, throughout here, I need to put in the SD card and re-download the firmware. Do you have any suggestion if they have the sticker there? What's the best way to go about that so I don't void the warranty just to get them on my pool?
You want to take that one, Austin?
Can you repeat the question?
So I guess these S19s that we got in, they're stuck in like a test phase, and the only way around it, instead of reconfiguring, is I have to put an SD card in and download the firmware that way, from what I've learned being here. Now I'm concerned with the sticker over the SD card, so any idea maybe around that without voiding the warranty?
All right.
Tough one.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways.
New machine. I don't know.
really
I just got it
disclose
in. I have
it,
no
but,
idea what to do with it.
But yeah, I mean, there are ways that you can change it back to stock, but it's more of a hardware thing than a software thing. I mean, it includes the programming and stuff, but the programming's on the chip, so it's pretty much as far as I'll go with that.
Did you hold the hard reset button for 10 seconds?
Yeah, I mean, it's like 60 units that are stuck that way. It's a pain in
And
the
they
ass.
came from Bitmain?
Yeah, out of the box, come from Bitmain. They're
From
stuck
Bitmain.
on the test
From
pool.
Bitmain or from a third-party seller?
No, from Bitmain.
Okay. Oh, let's talk after, because that's a really interesting case. So,
Really
Went through that actually.
Yeah? And you had to do the SD card?
No.
No, I did. I updated all the firmware. It doesn't change. It doesn't come up on the pool. It's ridiculous.
yeah, I want to say you should contact Bitmain, and that's why I asked if you bought it from Bitmain or if you bought it through a third-party seller.
Mine was test as well.
Yeah, and like some of them, you upgrade the firmware, it works, but for 60 of them, it doesn't work. Updating the firmware, tried it like 7 times, doesn't work. So now I'm going to try the SD card.
I was told it was a batching issue from them. I had a couple of mine that had the same thing where you're getting an abnormal.
Yeah.
And so there's,
And even when you pull BTC tools, it has my pool name and everything, but it just doesn't come through.
and you're like, why is it not working?
It's driving me nuts.
Apparently it was a batch of them.
Mine wasn't showing abnormal. It was showing normal,
Oh, was it?
but it was not hashing.
Oh.
It was just going to test or whatever.
Yeah, some of them are abnormal. Some of them are fully hashing. I mean, but it doesn't come to me. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, so it sounds like some gentlemen here are saying that it is a batch issue. We do have a pretty extensive network of techs as well. So I definitely encourage you, come talk to us, and we can maybe find you some resources to help with that as
That'd
well.
be great.
Thank you. We'll go with next question.
Yeah, it's not about 60 miners, it's just one, so forgive the very basic question, but I've been looking at home and following YouTube videos, and it always shows there's 3 different pools, like I'm trying to figure out like the 1800, or, do you know what I mean? And sometimes I've noticed when I try to connect it to a pool, it like only picks up the first one, and so I don't know if I'm doing something.
There's an option to put 3 pools in your settings. They're all backup pools. So your first pool is your priority. That pool goes down, then the miner will connect to the next pool, and then when that first pool goes back online, it'll in most cases automatically switch back to your main pool. So you want to have 3 pools, in case the first one or the second one goes down, you have a third one. So that way you don't have to really worry about the pool going down. You're still connected.
So it's a setting on the root when I go into that section? I'm
In the
supposed-
firmware, correct?
In the
Is that-
firmware?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Exactly.
Thank you.
You got it. Yeah, we can go to, you want to go to that? Yeah, so up there at the top, we've got, you can enter your worker and your username. You've got the Stratum link there, and you can put that in. You put in the worker, you put in your password. So you want to have 3 pools. I mean, don't just use one pool. It's just for you to make sure your equipment's online and mining, and also to secure the network. If everyone's on one pool, I mean, it kind of defeats the decentralization of it.
So when it comes to different manufacturers, which one do you think has the most information available when it comes to the dashboards? And what's missing that you'd say would be like the most critical thing for all of them across the board that they should all have, and then sometimes they don't?
I'll take the first part. I'll give the second part over to Austin. The manufacturer that has the most information is Bitmain. They're not always the easiest to work with, but they are the major player, and they've been around for a long time. They've successfully navigated that market. So they have most of the firmwares you see out there. It's for Bitmain equipment. That's probably the one that's going to be the most common. Most of anything you find online about repairing and modifying miners is Bitmain. MicroBT is probably the next closest. They're very open. They're very good to work with. I mean, they're miners. They're like the Hondas of mining. The thing runs all day. So there's a lot going on there as well. So that's coming up. And then the second part of your question, what's missing and what we'd like to see in some of the firmware. I'll let Austin, do you want to take that one in terms of what information? Personally, I think just having more visibility into like what the ASICs are doing and being able to modify individual ones would be great. But I'll let Austin talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we actually go a little bit over that later in this session. But as you can see here, like with Bitmain, it shows the chips, the locations of the chips. In my opinion, I mean, we're in the repair business, so having firmware that can actually help us diagnose the boards makes things a lot easier. So you also want to watch out for like dev fees, of course. Some people, you want to support the provider, the person who created everything, so watch out for free versions as well, so have viruses, but just do your research on the different firmwares and pools and everything.
Thanks.
Yep. Thank you.
How's it going? My name is Gio Mendoza. So in regards to hardware error rate, is there a certain rate over a given amount of time that I should be concerned about as far as like I have about 8 S19s, and they all, they're like tanks, so I haven't had any issues, but do you see hardware error rates or errors over a given amount of time?
So you're just asking about the hardware errors in general? Or?
Yeah, just, I mean, like, is there a certain amount that I should start being concerned about? Like, as far as if I start seeing, like right there, it says, 113,000 hardware errors over 16 days. So obviously that's a huge concern, but at 34,000, the hashboard below it, is that acceptable, or, I mean, what would you consider?
Yeah, so I mean, hardware errors aren't that bad. It just depends on if it starts making the unit crash or if the chips start falling out. You just want to make sure that that hashboard is, feeling comfortable. Sometimes even just switching the hashboards around. One spot in the, the case is cooler than the other spot. Some like it warmer, some like it cooler. But overall, hardware errors aren't that big of an issue. You can always restart your miner. That's why also having auto tuning ability, manual tuning ability really is a good benefit there.
Okay, cool, thanks.
We've got I think we've got time for one more question. So I think we'll take your question and then maybe one more if there is one, and that leaves us with 5 minutes. We'll just do a quick break, bio break. You want to stretch your legs? We'll do that, or if you want to come talk to us, go ahead.
My question's about power. Specifically, how sensitive are miners operating with brownouts, or if you have variation in the power?
Yeah, Surge Protector would be very good to invest in. We've been when we were building out one of our mining systems, we had a surge protector on one panel and no surge protector on the other, and it didn't really make that big of a difference. But we've had a few power supplies go out.
Yeah, my question is more about like variations in voltage. Input voltage can vary some. Like it's not a straight 220 or 240. can vary, or if power just drops and then comes back in 10 seconds. Does that kind of blow up miners, or does it?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a range that the power supplies can run on. It actually usually says right on the power supply. So you just want to make sure it's within that range. If you're having a different variance in frequency, of course, this goes more into electrical. You can always talk to an electrician about it, but like installing a capacitor or stuff like that will help stabilize that. Also, looking at what power supply you're using. Some of them have not only surge protection, but short protection. So that way, if the board starts drawing too many amps, it'll actually shut off the power supply. But if it's a different model or different version of a power supply, it can end up just keep going and just burn the whole hash board, start a fire. Could be dangerous.
So the power just dropping and coming back doesn't hurt anything too bad? I mean, I was just wondering if you need to do some sort of battery backup like you would a regular computer server.
Definitely wouldn't hurt.
You could set up a PLC system easier to monitor the voltage and then bring it all back up slowly. That's not something.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. I do want to mention, since we're talking about like the voltages and stuff, there's equipment that runs on different voltages. There's 110. There's a lot of facilities are running on 208. I think that's kind of like the data center standard here in the United States. And the machines, most of the machines are 220. Just something to think about. Look at the machine and figure out. You don't just buy the equipment and just expect you could just plug it in. I think most equipment, I think Bitmain, Gold Shell, Canon, they're like 208 to 240 volt. Micro BT, I believe it's like 220 to 240 volt. So, if you got a 208 system, you might not be able to run it efficiently. So you want to run it within the spec. I mean, if you're going to plug in, it's something the manufacturer may come back and say, hey, you shorted it or something.
Now we're just going to go over common issues and basic troubleshooting of a miner. One of the main common problems is your miner just goes down. You don't know what's going on with it. Basically, the first thing you want to do is try to log into your miner, try to get into that status screen, kernel log. You want to check the status of your miner, make sure that your settings are proper, that you're on the proper pool, that your worker name is correct, and you also want to make sure that you're checking like the fan speeds, the temperature, stuff like that. You can also see all that kind of stuff in the kernel log as well, but under the status page you can kind of see it a little easier and a little more visually. You can always restart your miner, and one of the main problems can be that the fans just shut off. It's a very common issue. So you just want to check the connection to your fans, make sure that they are working, that the RPMs are at the proper level. Another issue is you start seeing like a low hash rate coming out of your miner. It's supposed to be S9s, like 16 terahash. It's a lot lower. Could be that either one of the hash boards went down, it's missing some ASICs. So again, you want to log into your miner status, take a look to see if you can see if there's any missing ASICs. Of course, it depends on the firmware that you have and that you're using. Some of them don't even really show you how many ASIC chips are showing, are very minimal on what they actually show you. So that's why third-party firmware can be used, to help auto-tune, and different ones can actually let you manual tune your hash chips. Another common problem is your temperature sensor issues, or you have overheating. A lot of this stuff it's kind of repetition. You want to check your miner, make sure that you can see the status, log into it. With temperature sensors, those are a little tricky. We'll kind of go a little more over that in the advanced. But with temperature sensors, it could be just about anything. Chips, temperature sensor, different circuits. That's kind of why you want to look into the miner, make sure the fans are running properly. That could be the main cause causing the overheating. You also want to check inside the miner. It could be a lot of dust that builds up, causing it to overheat. So you want to make sure that you keep your miner maintenanced and clean in a clean environment. Also kind of go over the environment of what you should have your miner in to help make sure that you don't have any further issues with your machines. But I'm going to move on to basically, your hash boards are not registering on the firmware. Basically, it's like a zero ASIC. Your board's not showing up. It's missing a chain. One thing you want to do is obviously log in, look in the kernel log, see what's going on. Maybe you can see what chips are causing some faults. Another thing you can do is you can switch around your data cables. Like if chain 1 is missing, you switch it for chain 2. And that way you can kind of pinpoint if it's actually the hash board versus the control board. That also kind of help eliminate if it's the power supply as well. Very rarely, but it can happen where the power supply can't provide enough power for all the hash boards. Only like 2 or 3 of them are showing. Of course, that's rare. But most of the time it's because, and we'll kind of go over it further, but one of the signals gets disrupted somewhere along on the board, causes zero ASIC. It's one of the most common problems that you'll find when repairing hash boards. Same thing with like not registering properly on the pool. You want to make sure, again, log in, make sure your settings are correct, that you're logged into the right pool. Another thing that you can do is switch your pool, because sometimes that pool will go down. And even though you had a backup pool set on your settings, sometimes it won't even switch over. So that's why you just want to keep on top of your units, make sure that they're hashing away on a regular basis, not only on your pool as well as on your firmware. Because sometimes it'll say that it's hashing on your firmware, but guess what? It's actually not giving you any coin in your wallet from mining on the pool. So that's why you just kind of want to make sure that your worker name is correct. If you don't put that in correctly, it won't mine. So same thing with like viruses can also cause it to switch over to a different pool, different worker, and no matter what you do, try to flash it, it just continues to mine for somebody else. So that's something to be aware of. Same thing with like can't log into your miner. So basically, no matter what you do, you can't locate the IP address of your miner. So there's different things you can do. One thing is, you can clear your browser cache and look for the IP address using different software. There's a software called IP Reporter you can use, where you can literally just press the IP report button, and it'll show you exactly what the IP address is of that miner. Now another thing you can do is if you still can't get into it, you're going to want to go ahead and reflash the firmware. So obviously you can't do that remotely. You can't log in and update the software, so you're going to have to do it manually. So the way we do this is using an SD card. So we manually flash it that way. Depends on the control board that you're flashing. Different ones require different things that you have to do to make it actually flash. So it just depends. Same thing with also like the newer models. They actually lock you out to be able to flash it to any other firmwares. You're only able to remotely update. You can't even update via SD card. Kind of goes back on that issue of that test problem with the S19s. Because once you flash your control board, same thing with like your test fixtures. If you flash your test fixture to S19, now it's going to be permanently an S19 test fixture. So that's something to be aware of. Got to make sure that you have the right software that you're installing. Yeah, in last resort, you can always try swapping the control board and see if that works. You have a control board that that works, so you just swap it over to the new unit and see if that fixes the issue, and then obviously it's going to be the control board that's having problems. You can also do the same thing with like a power supply, swap the power supply. Main thing you want to do is kind of switch out the cables. It could be the Ethernet cable, for example. Just make sure it's connected, make sure that you're having Ethernet. It also goes back to, if you can't attain the IP address, make sure that it's actually connected to the internet. You can always switch it from a different miner, take that Ethernet cable, it works, switch it over, and now you can verify, what the problem is. So now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Adam to cover monitoring of your miners, different softwares that you can use.
Thank you, Austin. Thanks so much, Austin. So he talked about getting the IP address. There's different software. They all work differently. The IP is a little tricky. I mean, if you're using your computer, very important to clear that browser cache, because you're gonna be like, I'm typing in that IP address and that login page is not coming up. It could be referencing an old one. So there's different software, IP reporter, Angry IP scanner, Fing. I mean, there's different types of software, Mac, Windows, Android. They got them. We'll talk about remotely monitoring your miners. We're going to talk about stock firmware. We're not really going to talk about third-party firmware. Third-party firmware exists. There's nothing wrong with it. There's free and paid options. It's usually free for the first, X amount of miners. First 3, first 5, first 10, it's free. Or it's free for everything. You just get very limited features. We'll talk about those. There's a lot out there. Gentleman mentioned BTC tools. Hyvon Foreman is a sponsor here. They have a booth here. You guys can stop by and talk to them. We'll talk about the stock firmware that we have. Bitmain, Canon, MicroBT, Goldshell. Those are the main manufacturers of equipment, and they all have their own software as well. So the way that it works. May have clicked that by accident. The way that it works, you run, it's like a server. You can run a computer locally on your network. You can install some software on there, log me in, TeamViewer, etc. You VPN into it, and you can control the software. You run the software remotely on the computer. Most of it runs on Windows, so that's probably the best bet. Bitmain has AP Miner, so it's like you don't have to go into each individual. You don't have to have a browser tab open for each individual machine. So we showed some screenshots before of like an L3. So here's like that same L3, and you can see like what that screen looks like. That's the Bitmain software. It's called AP Miner Tool. You get it directly from their website. You scan your network and you see all the miners. Like if you've got more than one, like you don't have to have 50 browser tabs open and like frantically skip between them, and that's a pain and a hassle. So you've got like a software that puts it all together on one page, and it's got like a lot of stuff on there. It tells you how long it's been online, tells you if there's issues with it, like what's the issue, it gives you like error codes. They even like highlighted and so we put 2 on here. We had 2 machines, one that we fixed and one that had some issues. So just to show you guys, and like the A6, the X's and the O's, and it tells you like how much it's hashing and how much time's elapsed. And like look at this scroll bar. I mean, there's so much information out there. You can just drag and drop these fields. Whatever's like the one downside is like there's no little square there. You can't make this full screen. You're stuck with a one size box. So if anyone from Bitmain is here, definitely recommend you add that. You scroll over, you can add whatever fields you want. It's got that information there, and you've got all the little options here. I mean, you can restart the equipment. You can do all that cool stuff. I mean, everything that you can do from the web interface, from the stock software, lets you do it with the software that you have here. So that's Bitmain. They all have a software. In essence, it all kind of works the same way. MicroBT has what's Miner Tool. Yeah, there's same micro BT that we showed earlier. That's the same one up there. You can see, and it's got all that cool information. It tells you like all the same stuff you would see on that browser page. So so if you have one machine, fine. If you've got 500, it's free software and it lets you do it. So it's great. And you can select the machine you want to work on, and there's different like things you can do. You can restart it, rename it, you can reboot it, and everything that you would be able to do with that stock firmware through that web interface, it lets you do it here too. So you can one of the benefits of having like the third-party monitoring software, if you were to go with one of the other companies, is that if you've got machines from different manufacturers, like they most likely have an API for them, so you can like just monitor all of them through their one portal, as opposed to having a different software for every different manufacturer. So now if you've got machines from Bitmain, Canon, MicroBT, Goldshell, you're running 4 different software, you go with one of the third-party options, most likely you could just add them all to one dashboard and you don't have to deal with multiple softwares, and it nicely shows it to you on one page. Very interesting thing about the micro BT and the status bar, they actually put news and updates. It's quite useful information, although that scroll bar goes very slowly. It takes about 2 minutes to read a message that's like a sentence. So yeah, Canon, they decided to add some colors and some UI, so they try to they distinguish themselves a little bit that way. It's kind of the same. So you've got the software FMS. It's on their website. This is not their logo. This is the little bar that when you scan your network, that circle just kind of fills itself, so you know how many IPs it scanned through your network. So like that one is kind of, it starts out bright and it goes all the way, so you know it scanned the entire network, and it's got all your information. Like we're showing one machine here again. It shows all that information. You can select that machine, and you've got like all these buttons here. Earlier today we looked at what the firmware page looks like for Canon. This actually has like more options than I think it has more options than what you had on the web. So it's nice to look at, and it's got everything you would want to do over there. We just kind of blocked it out. It's got the pool address. So again, it's got it there. That's how Canon looks. So if anybody here has Canon machines, it should work with all your Canon machines. One of the things about the third-party software, if you use it, manufacturer releases a firmware update, a software update, or they release a new machine or a new variant of a machine. You're using that third-party company, and it can take them. Right now we've got new manufacturers coming on. There's new manufacturers I learn about every day that I've never heard of. There's recently, I think Square announced that they're going to be making their own miner. So every day it seems like more and more manufacturers are interested, and more people are interested in making the machines. I mean, they're very expensive right now. So my point here is that new machines are constantly coming out. If you're using third-party software, sometimes it may take them a while to add that. So that's kind of why we have that software as well, because when we're running the miners on one dashboard through a third-party software, we can have all the miners there, but then we get a new machine and that hasn't been added to the third-party option. We just use the stock software until it does. So that's, you kind of almost, if you're continually adding to your farm, it's almost necessary to have this. So that's Canon. Gold Shell, it's called Yada BC. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. There's also they have a cool website. It's called like Find My Gold Shell. It's like, I think it's like findmy.goldshell.com, and it'll actually just like scan your network through their website, and it'll show you all the miners. It's kind of cool. It just like shows you all the miners. So they're all continually developing and improving. We have I don't know what we have here. I think, what is this? This is like a mini Doge over here. So it's working slowly, but it's working. So you can create groups. You've got different you got KD, CK, HS, whatever box you have from Gold Shell. You can create groups for them, or you can put them all on one page. You can see that status bar I just talked about from Canon. I mean, they all have like this status bar. So when you scan your network, it shows you that status bar. Shows here, like I think it's already at 100%. So it means like we put one on this separate network and we added it to there, and so you can see what's going on. Like this, it's mining. Like I think that's Litecoin right there. Probably took that screenshot way too soon, so it shows it's like red because it hasn't fully started up yet. So it shows you like, hey, there's an issue. Probably wait a few more minutes, it would have stabilized a little bit. But it has different ways of telling you what's going on. You can see the temperature. It's got all that information. It's got the fans. So you can do it through the browser, or you can just do it through the app. Something to note here, there is a little square here, so you can make this full screen. So that's useful. So that's the software. We just kind of wanted to show you guys, and some of you guys are looking at buying different manufacturers. Some of you guys may be looking at buying your first miner and how to track it and monitor it, and there's just a lot of information along with that. One more thing, we are going to be passing around a hash board, or two hash boards. So just want to two points to make about that. There are sharp edges, so just be very careful how you're handling it. They're very sharp. I don't know how, but there's very sharp edges on there. So just be very careful about how you handle it. There are traces of lead. I mean, it uses lead solder, so if you're not comfortable handling that, just pass it on to the next person. It's not dangerous. I just want to let you guys know there is lead. Just after you touch it, just make sure you wash your hands. You'll be fine. Before you eat, before you touch your face, just wash your hands if you touch it. It's very minimal. So we'll get that passed on, so you guys can all kind of just have your hands on it as we go through these sessions. We'll start somewhere at one of the sides, and you guys can just pass it over. And then I'll hand it over to Austin, and he'll talk about firmware issues. So not necessarily firmware issues. He'll talk about issues that you're experiencing with the hash board or with the miner. Quite a lot of them can be fixed with just firmware. And very easily. However, this is kind of like a little, I guess maybe a little dirty trick in this industry, is that you can actually fix it without even having to take it apart. So Austin will talk to you about how to do that.
All right. So yeah, we're just going to go over some third-party firmware. Kind of give you a little tutorial here. So, this firmware lets you do auto-tuning. It also allows you to do some manual tuning, so we'll go over that here in a second. But as you can see, this firmware allows you to see each individual chip of the hash board, tells you what's going on with them. You can actually see hardware errors and all that kind of good stuff, but we'll go ahead and continue. So as you can see here, this hash board is showing some X's on chain 1, or actually chain 2 there. And the way you can see right here, it's kind of hard to see, that's why we blew it up for you, but it's showing an X. And it's causing a little bit of issues on this board. And this was actually done right after repairing this board. So we're going to go ahead and actually, this was actually after the auto-tuning. So one thing you could try to do is re-auto-tune it again, but we're going to go ahead and show you what you can do with the third-party firmware, allowing you to manually tune the frequencies. Also, you can, we kind of already went over it, but briefly, you have your hardware errors right here. As you can see, the one with the X's has the highest amount of hardware errors. It's also the one that has one of the highest temperatures. And even though the frequency is about the same on those hash boards, each one's a little different as well. So it just depends on the board. So this is going into manually changing the chip frequencies. What we did is we went ahead and there's a drop-down menu here that allows you to see the different chips that are showing hardware errors. at different levels. So it could be anywhere from like 5 to 80 of them. And as you can see, they become blacked out or grayed out. So you can see this board's only doing one chips, not liking it. And then this board, there's a whole bunch of chips that are like not wanting to hash very well. So you said it's chain 2 that was causing the issue. So as you can see here, that's the reason why. So you can actually downclock each chip individually versus actually having to do the whole frequency of the entire board. And so this way you can actually fix those hardware errors. As you can see here, when you scroll over, you can actually see the hardware errors that each chip is producing. So this is actually chip 54. Go figure that in the last screen. I can go back to it real quick. If you want to count all those X's and O's, you'll find out that that X is actually in location 54. And so as you see, that's also the chip that's causing the most hardware errors. So what we'll go ahead and do is we can downclock it individually, or we can downclock it by how many hardware errors are produced. So instead of doing one chip at a time, you can actually do like all the chips that are producing like over 80 hardware errors. And you basically can do this just like the auto tuning. So you basically change the frequency, you save it, you reset it, and then you let it run for about 2 minutes. You check on it, you come back to this screen as well as the miner status screen, go back and forth, and see what's going on with the board. And then you can come back again, lower the frequency. That way you can start fixing not only the hardware error chips, but the chips that aren't hashing very well. So as you can see, like the yellow chips and the dark green chips. And anything that's dark green or yellow is below 80% efficiency, so that's losing quite a bit of hashing power. So this kind of goes over, shows a little close-up of how you can decrease the frequency of all the chips with a certain amount of hardware errors. So this has a little drop-down menu here. You can also decrease the frequency of all the HW chips right here. So you can change by one frequency, or you can change it by different amounts of frequencies. And then you can also do it by how many hardware errors the chips are producing. So as you see here, after doing some manual auto tuning, now we just kind of got it down to this whole line here. Just so happens that this is actually a whole domain causing issues. And the reason is this chip right here, 54. So that one chip can actually take out the whole domain and then cause the whole board, if not the whole miner, to stop altogether. So basically, after you select your how many chips you want to change the frequencies on, whether you do it individually or in groups, you want to go ahead and hit the save and run button. And as I stated, you want to wait about 2 minutes, check on it again. This is also something that would be recommended to do on like a daily or weekly basis as well. So you come in the morning, you check on all your miners. Through this screen, you can actually see how all the chips are doing. By the miner status stage, you can kind of get an overview of what's going on, and then you come into this screen here and you can actually see exactly what's going on. And as you can see, this definitely helps when troubleshooting to fixing the mining hash boards, especially for preventative. Because if you were going to send it to a repair shop, let's say this board goes out, well, now we know that the problem's in this domain. It's probably going to be this chip that's causing the issue. Versus you send it to us, we have no idea what's going on. So we have to start from the very beginning. So by doing this, this will help decrease the amount of hardware errors as well as fix those X's. Just depends on the board. We'll have time for Q&A here in a few minutes. But yeah, like I mentioned, after downclocking, this whole domain went out on us. So we went ahead and started manually tuning this domain here, trying to fix that issue. And as you can see here, after the final tuning, it actually fixed the entire hash board as well as all the other hash boards. If you look closely, they're also at different frequencies, depending upon what the board likes. And as stated, you want to make sure to check the miner status on a regular basis. Because if this fan starts going out on you, it can cause the temperatures to start rising. Next thing you know, your whole machine goes out, and now you're down all these boards. And that can cause even more damage that becomes, not even worth fixing because there's too much time that it takes, or there's way too many parts that have to be replaced, that kind of thing. That pretty much concludes this tutorial. Here's going to be our next part 3, part 4 after we have lunch. I believe now we have some time for Q&A. And as promised, you can take a picture of this QR code and you can go ahead and get the PowerPoint. That way you can follow along during our next session and have it for your own records. Yeah, so I'll hand it over to Adam to ask them for Q&A.
Yeah, we're just trying to save our breath here. I mean, the air is kind of dry. It's been coming out from Chicago in the winter, something I forgot about. Yeah, so it's a QR code. You scan it. It'll take you to a form. Just fill out the form. And yeah, that basically ensures that we're able to send you that PowerPoint, and we're also able to invite you to those sessions that we'll have later on. They're not scheduled yet. You'll get some, you'll get a heads up, so you'll be able to plan accordingly for that. I think it'll be 3 sessions, probably like 2 hours apiece, and you can be able to ask any questions. I know there's a lot, and you might also pick up some stuff in the conference in the main exhibition area, and you might want to you may go home and you may have questions, and you might have questions that you don't know you have yet, and so we'll have those sessions where you can ask those questions in the future. So we'll leave that up there. We'll do a Q&A. We've got about 10 minutes, but we really have more than 10 minutes because we'll be doing lunch. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not sure if it's being served or we're kind of on our own here, but we'll do lunch and then we'll regroup at 1 p.m. We'll talk about some of the things that Austin had briefly shown in a previous screen. I'll go back to it real quick. We'll go over PCB components, symbols, the main circuits. There's so many of them. It's ridiculous. We'll go over signal flow and like how to actually test those points. We'll go over the common faults. So like we really talked about like how to hook up the miners, how the miners work holistically, what's the miner, what are the components. Now we're just kind of zoning in on the hash boards. That's typically where you have your issues coming up. We'll go over those faults specific to that hash board. We talked about it from like the firmware side. We'll look at it more on the hardware side. We'll talk about the full toolkit that's used, although I mentioned earlier all the stuff here. We'll go over the advanced stuff. We'll go over testing, rework, pick kit, multimeters. We'll have Austin try to do some, show you guys actually how that works from start to finish, everything we picked up. And I think that hash board might still be passed around. I'm not sure if it's gone through or not. Since we're getting lunch, we're going to be getting up, we're going to be moving around, shaking hands, we're going to be putting food in our mouth. Once again, just want to remind you, there are traces of lead on it. It's not that hard. Just wash your hands. You'll be fine. Just, again, reminding you guys, wash your hands, please. We don't want anybody with upset stomachs or anything like that, so you're able to kind of stay here with us through the rest of the conference. We'll go back to that QR code if anybody hasn't scanned it, and we'll have it again later, so don't worry if you didn't get a chance to get it. And we'll do the Q&A, and then we'll regroup again at 1 after lunch. I saw you standing up.
find out if there's a difference between common issues you see in micro BTs versus amp miners, and maybe are they fixable with the firmware, or are they a little bit more simple or difficult using either amp miners or micro BTs? And then just anecdotally, what have you seen in terms of what you can overclock with either the manufacturer's firmware versus a third-party firmware, and if you've seen immersion help with that in terms of just keeping the cooling infrastructure a little bit more stable?
You want to take that one, Austin?
Sure.
One question here. Let me repeat the question.
Yeah.
So question was, I'm trying to remember it as well myself now. Common issues between micro BT and Bitmain, and what's happening between those. I think part of it was also does one display more than the other, and then overclocking for either of the manufacturer, and whether dry or immersion. So Austin, you want to talk about common issues between the miners, and then I think you're probably more familiar with the overclocking piece. I'll tell you, the micro BT has been very reliable. I mentioned it earlier. I mean, I've seen equipment come from China, and the heat sinks are literally blocked with dust, and it still runs, and it doesn't overclock. And how that happens, I have no idea. But I have not seen a Bitmain miner do it like that. So I've seen those things. They run outside. I don't know if they run it in the rain or not. I mean, I don't know. Those things are like bulletproof. But Austin, you want to talk about some common faults for? Maybe we can activate his mic because he has one as well. You want to talk about common faults between micro BT, or maybe more so on Bitmain? I think you probably see more common faults on Bitmain.
Yeah. So I mean, especially with Bitmain, there's a lot more information out there as far as repairs, pretty much everything. A lot of the other manufacturers are kind of catching up, micro BT as well. But as far as like the firmwares and stuff, just really comes down to being able to see what's going on with the boards. As far as like the hardware side of things, the boards are a little different. Although they all run very similar, they all have very similar circuits. We'll actually kind of go over that a little bit later.
And then the second part was like overclocking and doing it versus air versus immersion. Immersion, I think it's pretty common that you can probably run it more stably just because of the environment. My experience in overclocking, just long story short, don't do it unless you really have your environment. Unless you're doing immersion, unless you've got it set up in a facility where you're guaranteed to have the right humidity, the right temperature all year. There's been a lot of long nights to get there for overclocking, and at the end of the day, like the life of your equipment is probably gonna get shortened. So it's doable. You can do it safely. It's extremely difficult. We mentioned earlier, you want your equipment running for like 7 years. I mean, that's Bitmain's goal. Get that equipment out there like 7 years. You definitely don't want your equipment dead in 2 years, and then adding on repair and downtime and all that. Anything you want to add about overclocking? Like I said, it can be done safely, and there's firmware that can do it. Austin, you want to chime in?
Yeah, actually reminds me about some S9s that I heard of that instead of overclocking, they decided to underclock. And these were kind of the cleanest machines, best running machines that you probably would see. And the reason is instead of overclocking or running at what its stock is, they actually underclocked it, increasing not only efficiency, so you're using less power, higher hash rate, and it makes it so that way the life of the machine can last longer, because you're not stressing out those circuits. Also comes down to environment for sure, whether you're doing air-cooled or immersion. If you have a bad immersion system, you're going to damage those boards if you don't know what you're doing. Same thing with air cooling. same problems. If you don't have the right circulation of air, if those things get too hot, too cold even, they won't even start up. So you kind of got to find that Goldilocks median and what's right for you, because some people, they want as many coins as possible. Other people, maybe you have more machines so you can underclock them. Just depends on your own situation. As far as like micro BT and there's not quite that much, third-party firmwares out there for anything but Bitmain. That might soon change, but especially now that they're making it so it's even more difficult to even change the firmware. We'll see what happens in the future, but.
I do want to add one piece about that overclocking concept. So, like Gold Shell, Canon, MicroBT, they actually like the stock firmware lets you overclock. Actually, you may want to mention that. You can actually set the machine like low power, normal, or performance mode. So within a certain range, safely, you can overclock it. So that's something to think about. And then if you're overclocking it, again, one other thing I'll add is it's not a one-size-fits-all. You have one miner with 3 hash boards, and don't expect to overclock all of them the same way for it to work the same way. You might have to do different overclocking on individual boards. Same goes with batches across machines. I mean, and it takes a lot of time to find what works as well. So just because you found a sweet spot on one machine, don't expect it to work across all of them. Dude, next question, please.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Good info so far. I was just gonna ask around like firmware and firmware upgrades. Like, is there any like Windows? You take a new release, maybe just with some stock, firmware upgrades. Any best practices you guys like recommend around that? Or as soon as a release is out, like, are you just upgrading those machines right away?
So if I understand the question, like in terms of timing, when to upgrade and how often to do the upgrade?
Yeah, like is there any like operational risk in just doing an upgrade right away?
I mean, when it comes to these machines, I think of it like same way when Apple comes out with a new software update for the iPhone, I wait a few weeks. Certainly, unless you know of a specific issue you're looking to fix, I'd rather other people deal with that issue, fix it, and then I'll wait until I know what's going on with that new version before I upgrade to it. And then also, like, there aren't really that many firmware upgrades. I think, like, I was just looking on the MicroBT website the other day. I mean, the latest firmware is like from May of last year, so it's it doesn't. Yeah. It's not like your regular Windows or Mac updates.
Yeah, and then you mentioned malware earlier. Like, if a machine does become compromised, like, I guess what would the process kind of look like? Is there even like any way to kind of clean the machine, or have you guys?
Thanks for asking that question. Yeah. We actually wanted to do a session on viruses and firmware. I think we pulled it from the presentation. There's just a lot of content we want to put in, and malware, viruses, they definitely happen, and it can compromise your machine. So sometimes you can just reflash it, depending on the virus that's on there. You may not be able to reflash it. It won't let you. So the option then is you can like short circuit the actual control board. So I don't think I thought I saw one here, but yeah, you can, there's different points. I can't really show you, but you can short circuit the control board and it'll basically like force reflash or reset it. And you can do that. Sometimes you have to, we've got one here. Yeah, so there's various different pins on here and stuff, and you can definitely reset it that way, or you can. Yeah, I know we're just about over on time. You can like reflash it. You can short circuit it. Sometimes you have to replace the chip on there. The best thing, I mean, control boards are like $100. You're gonna just save yourself so much time and headache by replacing the control board altogether. So that's probably why we just kind of pulled that session. I mean, they do happen, and there's things you want to do, like Austin mentioned earlier. Try different firmwares. Don't have everything. Don't have only one. Eliminate as many fault points as you want. Use a VPN. Use a separate network. Use multiple different firmwares. Use different machines. I mean, one virus is not going to work across all malware, all firmware the same way across all machines and operating systems. So you want to eliminate those points. So yeah, we had a session on that. Thanks for asking that. That's actually an excellent question because they are real. They do exist. So yeah, and that's also something to be careful when you buy equipment used. Use it, when you power it on, just make sure it's on like a separate network and all that, and you can run it. Typically, you won't know that you have a virus until it's tricky. It'll let you change the pool to your pool, and you're like, cool, awesome, it's on my pool, and you come back tomorrow and it's not on your pool again. So they're getting smarter with that virus stuff. We'll go to the next question, please.
Can you guys tell us a little more about your company, your repair process, turnaround times, rates, and then do you guys sell individual components?
Yeah, so we are in Chicago. We're in Brighton Park, about 10 minutes outside of Midway. We officially registered the company in the third quarter of 2021. However, I've been a miner since 2010, roughly, something around there. Austin's been repairing equipment for the longest time ever. We've got a few other team members. Everybody's got different experience from different places, and we've got different experience in crypto. And so we brought all of our knowledge together to form this. So we repair the equipment in Chicago. We offer training. We are working on doing US-based warranty repairs. And we do, I mentioned the training, we do some advisory parts. We can get pretty much any part. We've got like part kits. Essentially, you get a certain hash board. We can get like all the individual components for that hash board, so you don't have to go through 400 different sellers on Alibaba and figure out what's for what. And like we've got it all kind of consolidated. We just and also the other thing is like a lot of the equipment, it comes from China, and we get it there as well, but we buy it and we hold it here. And so the advantage is really like pricing wise, it's pretty much the same. It's just you'll get it a little bit sooner maybe from us. We've got vetted suppliers that we've used, so we know who delivers on time, who has more reliable batches. For miners, we sell those as well, and we've got relationships with brokers overseas. So basically, I mean, I just had a broker asking me if I want to buy S19 XPs. Supposedly, they're not even out on the market until this summer, but this guy has them and he's selling them. So, and I've bought from him before, so he's legit. So yeah, we can get equipment as well. If anybody's looking for equipment, definitely come talk to us. Whether it's we don't supply transformers and things like that for building out your facility. It's mostly on the miners and the parts.
Just a real quick question. I missed the brand or developer who made the firmware that you guys were showing up on screen. I was just curious what one that was that you guys were showing.
That one was Hyvon, right?
Oh.
Yeah.
How do you spell that real quick?
Hiveon.
Thank you very much.
Got any other questions? No? All right. Well, we've got one more.
Sorry, one last one. I noticed on a lot of the third-party stuff, and you made the recommendation of just checking it daily, make sure that it, see where you're at daily. Is there anyone providing text or mobile notifications for these sort of things?
For monitoring your hardware, correct? Yeah. Yeah, actually, we just mentioned Hyvon. I know you can actually like set up, it's kind of funny, you can set up a Telegram notification, it'll send you a message. So there's different ways you can do it. That's where I think the third-party firmware really shines. You can set up notifications. Your miner goes down. You can even set like when to notify foreman. You can set like, your fan or your temperature goes up or down 10 degrees or 10% or something like that. It'll notify you. So you don't have to be sitting there at your computer. You can preset whatever settings you want. They recommend certain settings, like by default they'll put some settings, and sometimes they're not that great for certain miners. So you can tweak it and set it up to your liking, and yeah, you can definitely set up notifications like that. All right, and then one last question. Can we see by show of hands if someone's learned something today? Oh, awesome. Okay, cool.